Welcome back to Fear Rest. In today's episode, I'm sharing 9 true disturbing stories from the Appalachian Trail. These are tales of people who ventured into those ancient mountains and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The section of the Appalachian Trail that cuts through southwestern Virginia near Dismal Creek has always had a reputation. Not the kind of reputation that keeps people away entirely, but the kind that makes locals pause before recommending it to out-of-towners. I grew up about 40 minutes from there, in a town so small we didn't even have a proper grocery store, just a gas station that sold expired milk and hunting supplies. My Uncle Raymond used to trap along those ridges back in the 70s, and he'd always said there were parts of the woods where his dogs wouldn't go, just stopped dead and whined until he turned back. I was 23 when I decided to do a solo 3-day hike through that area. It was late September, and I'd just quit a job I hated at a call center in Roanoke. I needed to clear my head, and I figured the trail would be mostly empty on a weekday. I told my roommate I'd be back by Friday, threw some gear in my truck, and drove out before I could talk myself out of it. The parking area at the trailhead was empty except for one other vehicle, a green Subaru with Pennsylvania plates that looked like it had been there a while. Thick coating of pollen on the windshield. I remember thinking whoever owned it was probably miles deep by now. The first day was perfect. Cool but not cold, leaves just starting to turn. I made good time and set up camp near a creek around 6 o'clock. The sound of running water always helps me sleep. I ate some beef jerky and instant mashed potatoes, hung my food bag properly, and settled into my tent just as the light started failing. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. I mean, there's quiet, and then there's the kind of silence where you start hearing your own pulse in your ears. No insects, no birds settling in for the night, just the creek and my breathing. I told myself I was being stupid. I'd been on plenty of solo trips before, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that I'd forgotten something important, like when you leave the house and can't remember if you locked the door. I lay there for maybe an hour, just listening, before exhaustion finally pulled me under. I woke up sometime deep in the night to the sound of footsteps. Not animal footsteps. I've heard plenty of deer and raccoons moving through campsites. These were deliberately placed, heavy, boots on packed dirt. They circled my tent slowly, maybe 10 feet out. I held my breath and didn't move. My hand found the knife I keep near my sleeping bag and I waited. The footsteps made a complete circle, then stopped directly behind my head. I could hear breathing now, slow and even, like whoever it was wasn't even winded from hiking in the dark. Then the voice came. It was my Uncle Raymond's voice, but not quite right. Like someone doing an impression of him who'd never actually heard him speak, just read a description. "You shouldn't be here, son," it said. My uncle had been dead for 6 years. I know because I was at his funeral. I watched them lower the casket. The footsteps started again, moving away from the tent toward the creek. I stayed frozen until the sound faded completely, then waited another hour before I even dared to turn on my headlamp. When I finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent and look outside, I could see the trail clearly in the moonlight. There were boot prints in the soft earth near the tent. Adult-sized, probably a men's 10 or 11. But here's the thing that made my chest tight. The prints appeared in a complete circle around my tent, but there was no trail leading to them. No prints approaching from the woods or the trail. They just started, circled, and then stopped, like someone had been lowered down from above. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat there with my knife in my hand, watching the tent walls and listening to the creek. When dawn finally broke, I packed up faster than I'd ever broken camp in my life. I told myself I'd continue the hike, just move to a different area. But as I started walking, I found something that made me change my mind entirely. About a quarter mile up the trail, someone had arranged stones across the path. Not randomly, in a very specific pattern. A large flat stone in the center with 7 smaller ones placed around it in a circle, each one standing upright on its edge. It should have fallen over. Physics said it should have fallen. But all 7 stood perfectly balanced, and in the middle of the center stone, someone had scratched a symbol that looked like an eye with too many lashes radiating out from it. I stepped around it carefully and kept walking, but my hands were shaking. The trail ahead looked normal enough. Just woods and fallen leaves and morning light filtering through the canopy. But every 50 yards or so, I'd find another arrangement. Stones, sticks bound together with what looked like old twine. Once, a circle of white mushrooms that definitely hadn't been there the day before, grown up overnight in a perfect ring maybe 6 feet across. In the exact center of that circle was a single boot print, much smaller than the ones from the night before. Maybe a child's size. That's when I heard it again. My uncle's voice, but this time coming from ahead of me on the trail around the next bend. "You shouldn't be here, son." Exactly the same intonation. Exactly the same wrong quality to it. I turned around and started walking back the way I'd come. Not running, not yet, but moving fast. The voice called out again, and this time it was behind me. I didn't look back. I just kept my eyes on the trail ahead and focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The arrangement of stones I'd passed earlier was still there, but now there were 9 smaller stones instead of 7, and the symbol in the center had been altered. It looked like someone had scratched through it, turning the eye shape into something that looked more like a mouth opened wide. I did run then. I don't remember much about the next hour, except the sound of my own breathing and the weight of my pack slamming against my back. When I finally burst out of the tree line into the parking area, the green Subaru was still there. Same position, same coating of pollen, but now there was something tucked under the windshield wiper, a strip of birch bark with a symbol burned into it. The same eye mouth shape from the trail. I got in my truck and left. I didn't stop driving until I was back in Roanoke, and even then I kept checking my rearview mirror like something might be following me on the highway. 2 weeks later, I saw a news story about how they'd found the green Subaru still parked at the trailhead. The owner's name was Marcus Chen, a grad student from Pittsburgh doing research on native plant species. They found his tent about 3 miles in, still set up, all his gear intact. They never found him. The search went on for 10 days before they called it off. I still have the photos on my phone from that trip. There's one I took of the mushroom circle before I realized how wrong everything was. I've zoomed in on it 100 times. In the background, just barely visible between the trees, there's something pale standing perfectly still. It's too far away to make out details, but the proportions are wrong. The arms hang too low, almost to the ground. Sometimes I think about deleting the photo, but I never do. I guess part of me needs to remember that I didn't imagine it. But whatever is in those woods is real, and it's still there, waiting for the next person who doesn't listen to the warnings. Story 2. I inherited my grandmother's property in northern Georgia the summer I turned 31. It wasn't much, just a small cabin on about 15 acres butting up against the Chattahoochee National Forest, with the Appalachian Trail running maybe a half mile from the back property line. She lived there alone for 18 years after my grandfather passed, and toward the end, she kept calling my mother saying she needed to move, that she couldn't stay there anymore. We all thought it was just age catching up with her. Dementia, maybe. She died in a nursing home in Darlunga, and I was the only grandkid who didn't have kids or a serious job tying me down, so I got the place. The lawyer said I should probably sell it quickly before the market shifted. Good location, close to popular trail access. Could get a decent price from a developer or someone wanting a vacation rental. But I decided to spend a few weeks there first, fixing it up. The cabin needed work, new roof, definitely new plumbing, maybe some foundation repair. I'm not much of a handyman, but I figured I could assess what needed doing and get quotes from contractors. I drove up on a Tuesday in July with my dog, a German Shepherd mix named Apollo. He was usually good company, calm and quiet, unless there was a real reason to alert. The cabin was exactly like I remembered from childhood visits, just more rundown. One main room with a wood stove, a tiny bedroom barely big enough for a double bed, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But it was clean. My grandmother had kept it immaculate up until she left. I unpacked my stuff, set up Apollo's bowls on the porch, and spent the first evening just sitting outside watching the woods go dark. The crickets were so loud they almost hurt my ears. That first night I slept fine. So did Apollo, curled up at the foot of the bed like always. But the second night, he started acting strange around midnight. He was standing at the bedroom door staring into the main room with his ears pinned back flat against his head. Not growling, just staring with this intensity that made my skin prickle. I got up and looked, but there was nothing there, just shadows from the porch light filtering through the windows. "Come on, boy," I said and patted the bed. He wouldn't move, wouldn't even look at me, just kept staring at that empty room. I left him there and went back to bed, but I didn't really sleep. Around 3 in the morning I heard scratching, soft at first, then more insistent. It was coming from underneath the floorboards. I'd been in enough old cabins to know that mice and squirrels could make a hell of a racket in crawl spaces, so I wasn't too worried. But Apollo finally broke his silence and started barking, and the scratching stopped immediately. Then, after maybe 30 seconds of quiet, it started up again directly under the bed. Not random scratching, it moved in a line from one side to the other, then back again, like something was dragging its nails along the underside of the floor. In the morning, I went outside and found the crawl space access on the side of the cabin. The lattice covering had been torn away at one corner, just enough for something to squeeze through. I got my flashlight and bent down to look inside. The beam caught something pale about 10 feet back, and for a second I thought it was just a white trash bag someone had shoved under there years ago. But then it moved, not like an animal startled by light, more like someone adjusting their position to get more comfortable. I saw what might have been a shoulder, and part of an arm that looked too thin, and then my brain finally caught up with my eyes, and I jerked backwards so hard I hit my head on the cabin siding. Apollo was losing his mind by this point, barking and lunging toward the crawl space opening. I grabbed his collar and dragged him back inside, then locked the door even though that felt stupid. What was a lock going to do against something that lived in the crawl space? I spent that whole day trying to convince myself I'd seen wrong. A trick of the light, a reflection, maybe a possum or a stray cat. But I kept thinking about how my grandmother had called my mother, how she'd said she couldn't stay anymore, how toward the end she'd insisted something was under the house at night, that she could hear it moving around down there. We'd all dismissed it. That evening I went into the bedroom and found my grandmother's old journal in the nightstand drawer. I'd seen it before but never read it. Felt like an invasion of privacy. Now I flipped through the pages looking for anything recent. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before she moved out. It said, "It's getting bolder." Last night it came up through the floor vent while I was sleeping. I felt fingers on my ankle, cold and damp. "I'm leaving tomorrow. I should have left years ago. If someone stays here after me, they need to know, don't sleep in the bedroom. Don't let it learn your smell." I read that entry 5 times, and each time my mouth got drier. I looked at the floor vent at the foot of the bed. Standard metal grate, probably 8 inches by 10. The screws looked old and loose. I got up and checked. They turned easily by hand, like they'd been removed and replaced many times. I made my decision then. I'd leave in the morning, first light. Put the cabin on the market as is, and let someone else deal with whatever was living underneath it. But I had to make it through one more night, and the sun was already setting. I moved all my stuff into the main room, pushed the couch against the wall, and sat there with Apollo and every light in the cabin blazing. I had my truck keys in my pocket and my phone fully charged. If anything happened, we'd run. Around 2 in the morning, the scratching started again. This time it was in the bedroom, and I could hear the metal grate being moved, the screws rattling in their holes. Apollo pressed himself against my legs, shaking but not barking. We both just watched the bedroom doorway and waited. The grate hit the floor with a clatter, and for maybe 10 seconds there was nothing. Then something pale emerged from the floor. I only saw it in pieces, an arm reaching up, gripping the edge of the vent opening. The top of a head, mostly bald, with strands of long dark hair hanging down. It pulled itself up with this horrible fluid motion, like it didn't have bones in the normal places. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed Apollo's collar and ran for the door, fumbling with the lock. Behind me I heard a sound like wet cloth dragging across wood. The door finally opened, and we sprinted for my truck. I didn't look back. I just threw Apollo into the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove down that dirt driveway faster than I've ever driven in my life. When I got to the main road, I finally looked in the rearview mirror. The cabin lights were still on, and I could see something standing on the porch. Tall and thin, swaying slightly, too far away to make out details, but I could see that its arms hung almost to its knees. I called a real estate agent the next day from a motel room 30 miles away. I told her to sell it as is, foundation problems, price to move. She tried to argue that I should at least clean it out first, get an inspection. I told her no, she could keep whatever was inside. I just wanted it gone. The cabin sold 3 weeks later to a couple from Florida looking for a weekend getaway. I almost called them, almost told them not to sleep in the bedroom. But what would I have said? But there's something living in the crawl space that learned my grandmother's smell over 18 years, that it was already learning mine. I still have nightmares about that pale arm reaching up through the floor vent. Sometimes in the dreams, I don't run fast enough. and I feel those cold, damp fingers close around my ankle. I wake up checking to make sure my bedroom is on the second floor, not the first. Make sure there's no crawl space underneath me. Apollo died last year, cancer, but I got another dog immediately. A Rottweiler this time, bigger and louder. I tell people it's for protection, and I guess that's true. Just not the kind of protection they're probably imagining. Story 3. The shelter on Cove Mountain in Pennsylvania doesn't get used much anymore, at least not according to the trail journals. It's about 3 miles off the main AT route, down a side trail that's not well maintained, and there's a better shelter another 6 miles north that most hikers push for instead. But I was doing a section hike in October with my friend Trevor, and we'd gotten a later start than planned. By the time we reached the turnoff to Cove Mountain, it was already getting dark, and neither of us wanted to hike another 6 miles with just our headlamps. Trevor checked his phone, no signal, which was typical for that area, and we decided to take the side trail. The shelter was exactly the kind of basic 3-sided structure you find all along the AT. Wooden platform, pitched roof, open front facing the woods. There was a fire ring out front and a primitive toilet about 50 yards down. The whole area smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke, but not fresh smoke. Old smoke like it had soaked into the boards over many seasons. Someone had carved names into the shelter posts going back decades. Mike and Sarah 1987, Thunder Road 2003, stuff like that. It felt lived in a good way, like generations of hikers had passed through safely. We set up our sleeping bags on the platform, cooked some ramen on Trevor's camp stove, and settled in for the night. It was cold enough that we could see our breath. I remember Trevor complaining about forgetting his warm socks, and me giving him an extra pair. Normal stuff, boring stuff. I was almost asleep when I heard Trevor sit up suddenly. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first I didn't hear anything unusual, just wind moving through the trees. But then I caught it, a voice, distant but clear enough to understand. Someone calling out, "Help, please help me." It was a woman's voice, strained like she was injured or exhausted. Trevor was already pulling his boots on. "Someone's hurt," he said. "We need to find them." I sat up too, but something about it felt off. I couldn't explain why. The voice came again, same words, same tone, exactly the same, like it was on a loop. "Trevor, wait," I started to say, but he was already grabbing his flashlight and climbing down from the shelter platform. "Hello," he called out toward the woods. "Where are you? Keep talking so we can find you." The voice responded immediately. "Help, please help me." Same inflection, same everything. It was coming from somewhere past the tree line, maybe 100 yards into the forest. I got my boots on and followed Trevor, but I was moving slower, trying to think. My grandfather had been a search and rescue volunteer for 20 years before he retired, and he'd told me stories about how sound carries weird in mountains. How you can hear someone clearly, but completely misjudge the distance and direction. How people searching for voices in the dark can get turned around and end up needing rescue themselves. "We should mark our path," I said, "so we can find our way back." Trevor wasn't listening. He was already 30 feet into the woods, sweeping his flashlight beam back and forth. "Hello, we're coming, keep making noise." "Help, please help me." I grabbed a handful of small stones from the ground and started placing them every few yards as I followed Trevor. Not a perfect system, but better than nothing. The voice kept calling, always the same words, always staying just ahead of us. We pushed through underbrush and around trees for maybe 10 minutes, and then Trevor stopped so suddenly I almost ran into him. "It's moving," he said. His voice had changed, less confident. The voice, "It's moving parallel to us now." Why would someone do that? We both stood there listening. The voice called again, but he was right. It had shifted position. Not deeper into the woods ahead of us, but off to our left now, still the same distance away. "Help, please help me." "That doesn't make sense," I said quietly. "If she's injured and needs help, why is she moving away?" Trevor turned his flashlight beam in the new direction. The trees were thicker there, older growth with trunks wide enough to hide behind. "Maybe she's confused," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Hypothermia can make people do weird things." "Let's go back to the shelter," I said. "We can wait until morning and do a proper search with better light, maybe get help." "Help, please help me." The voice was closer now, much closer, maybe only 20 feet away, just past the circle of our flashlight beams, but we still couldn't see anyone, just trees and darkness and our own breath fogging in the cold air. Trevor took a step forward, and I grabbed his arm. "Don't. Someone needs help," he said, but he'd stopped moving. "Help, please help me." Right next to us. So close I should have been able to reach out and touch whoever was speaking, but there was no one there, just empty forest. And then I noticed something that made my throat close up. There was no breath fog. The voice was coming from somewhere near us, crystal clear in the cold October air, but there was no visible breath. When Trevor and I spoke, every word came out in a white cloud, but the voice in the darkness produced nothing. "We are leaving," I said, and this time I didn't wait for Trevor to agree. I turned around and started walking back the way we'd come, following my trail of stones, pulling Trevor along by his jacket. He finally started moving with me, walking backward at first, keeping his flashlight pointed at where the voice had been. "Help, please help me." Behind us now, following, and then, horribly, the voice changed. It was still a woman's voice, but the words were different. "Why won't you help me?" We walked faster. The voice kept pace, staying maybe 15 feet back, just outside our light. "Why won't you help me? Don't you care? Don't you care that I'm hurt?" "It's not real," I said, mostly to convince myself. "It's not real, just keep walking." The voice changed again. This time it was angry. "You're just like the others. You're going to leave me here." I saw my trail of stones up ahead, pale in the flashlight beam, leading back toward the shelter. We were close, maybe another minute of walking, but then Trevor stopped and turned his light behind us toward the voice. "I just want to see," he said. "I need to see what it is." His beam caught something moving between the trees, pale and thin, staying just at the edge of the light. It might have been a person, or it might have been a shadow shaped wrong. But the proportions were off in a way that made my eyes hurt trying to focus on it. Too tall, too narrow, arms that seemed to have too many joints. "Trevor, don't look at it," I said. "Just walk." But he was frozen, staring. The thing moved closer and I could see more details now. No, that's not right. I could see there were no details. Where there should have been features, there was just smooth blankness, like someone had stretched skin over a stick figure. The voice came again, but now it wasn't coming from the figure. It was coming from all around us, from the trees themselves. "Why won't you help me? Why won't you help me? Why won't you help me?" I physically turned Trevor around and pushed him toward the shelter. This time he moved, and we both ran. The voice followed, repeating the same question over and over, getting louder and faster until the words started to overlap and lose meaning. We burst out of the tree line and onto the shelter clearing, and the voice stopped, just cut off mid-word into complete silence. We didn't talk about it. We just grabbed our gear, stuffed it into our packs without organizing anything, and got out of there. We hiked the next 6 miles in the dark, slipping on rocks and roots, until we reached the next shelter. There were 2 other hikers there, a couple from Ohio, and they looked at us like we were crazy when we stumbled in at midnight. We must have looked it too, covered in scratches from pushing through brush, wild-eyed, breathing hard. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there watching the open front of the shelter, waiting for something to emerge from the darkness and start calling for help. When morning finally came, Trevor and I packed up and hiked another 15 miles without stopping. Neither of us suggested going back to check on the voice. Neither of us reported it to rangers or other hikers. What would we even say? About a week after we got home, Trevor sent me a link to a hiking forum. Someone had posted asking if anyone knew why the Cove Mountain Shelter was considered bad luck. The thread was old, from 2011, and most of it was people laughing it off as superstition. But near the bottom, someone had written, "Stayed there in 2008, heard someone calling for help around midnight, went to investigate and the voice led us in circles for an hour, never found anyone. Later learned that 3 hikers disappeared near there in the 1970s during a search and rescue operation. They were looking for a woman who'd fallen off the trail, found her body eventually, but the searchers never came back out of the woods. They're still listed as missing." I wanted to verify that, look it up in news archives or something, but I also didn't want to know. Sometimes I think that's worse, when you realize that whatever you encountered has been there for decades, doing the same thing over and over, calling for help in a dead woman's voice, leading people into the woods, and you start to wonder if maybe those 3 searchers from the 70s heard the same thing we did. if maybe they followed the voice just a little bit farther than we did. If they're still out there somewhere, or if something is still out there wearing their voices now, calling to the next group of hikers who decide to stay at that shelter. Trevor won't hike the AT anymore. He sold all his gear and took up rock climbing instead, staying on established routes with crowds of people. I still hike sometimes, but never alone, and never on sections with shelters more than a mile off the main trail. And if I ever hear someone calling for help in the woods at night, I'm not going to investigate. I'm going to walk in the opposite direction as fast as I can and try not to think about who might actually need help versus what might be wearing a human voice like a mask. Story 4. My sister Bethany got really into long-distance hiking the year she turned 28. She'd just gone through a messy divorce and decided she needed something to focus on, some big goal to work toward. So she started training to thru-hike the entire Appalachian Trail, Georgia to Maine, leaving in March and hoping to finish by early fall. I thought it was a great idea, honestly. She needed something healthy to pour her energy into, and she'd always loved camping as a kid. She sent me regular updates for the first few months, photos of beautiful views, funny stories about trail angels and hostile owners, complaints about her feet and her pack weight, all normal thru-hiker stuff. But in June, when she was somewhere in the Smokies, the messages started getting weird. Not obviously weird, just off. She'd send me texts late at night saying things like, "Do you remember that rhyme Mom used to sing to us before bed?" Or, "I keep thinking about the house on Maple Street, the one with the blue door. Did we ever go inside?" Problem was, our mom never sang to us. She'd worked night shifts and was usually asleep when we went to bed. And there was no house with a blue door on Maple Street, or any street I could remember. I called her when I got that message, but she didn't answer. She texted back an hour later, "Sorry, bad signal, everything's fine, just tired." And then nothing for 3 days. When she finally called me, she sounded strange, distant, like she was concentrating very hard on something else while talking to me. "Hey," she said, "sorry I've been out of touch. The mountains here are incredible." "Are you okay?" I asked. "Your messages have been kind of concerning." "What messages?" I read them back to her. There was a long pause. "I didn't send those," she said finally. "Bait, they're from your number." I know, I'm looking at my sent messages right now and they're there, but I don't remember writing them. I must have been really out of it. Heat, exhaustion maybe. I didn't like that explanation, but what was I going to do? She was a grown woman 2 states away. "Maybe you should take a 0 day, I suggested. "Rest up in a town." "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, maybe. Listen, I need to go. My phone's dying." She hung up before I could say anything else. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. The messages got worse after that. She'd send me photos with no caption, images of the trail that looked normal at first glance, but when you looked closer, something was off. Trees in the background that seemed to have faces in the bark patterns. Shadows that didn't match the position of the sun. In one photo, there was a figure standing far back on the trail behind her, almost obscured by distance and trees. It looked like another hiker at first, but the more I stared at it, the more wrong it seemed. Too tall, too still. I zoomed in as far as my phone would allow, and I swear the figure didn't have a face, just a blank oval where features should have been. I texted her immediately, "Who's that person in the background?" She replied, "What person?" I called her. This time she answered on the first ring, and I could hear wind and birds in the background. "The person in the photo you just sent," I said, "standing on the trail behind you." "There wasn't anyone behind me," she said. "I haven't seen another hiker in 2 days. I'm in a really remote section." "Bethany, I'm looking at the photo right now. There's someone there." Silence, then, "Send it back to me." I forwarded the image and waited. I could hear her breathing change, getting faster. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You see it?" "It's been following me," she said. I kept seeing something out of the corner of my eye for the past week, but every time I turned around there was nothing there. I thought I was imagining it. I thought I was going crazy from being alone too long. "You need to get off the trail," I said. "Right now, find the nearest road and hitch to a town." "I'm in the middle of nowhere. The next road crossing is 15 miles away." "Then hike those 15 miles tonight. Don't stop, don't sleep. It's going to be dark in a few hours. I don't care, move now. To her credit, she listened. She texted me every hour to confirm she was still walking. The messages were brief: mile 8, mile 11, getting dark, using headlamp. And then, around 10 p.m., I hear footsteps behind me, matching my pace exactly. I was sitting in my apartment 700 miles away, completely helpless. I called her, and she answered but didn't speak. I could just hear her breathing, hard and fast, and the sound of her boots on dirt. "Bait," I said. "I can't talk right now," she whispered. "If I stop moving, it gets closer. Every time I stop to rest, even for a few seconds, I hear it getting closer. The footsteps get louder." "How close?" "I don't know, I'm too scared to look back. Maybe 20 feet. "Keep walking, you're almost to the road." The line stayed open. I listened to her footsteps and her breathing for another 30 minutes. Then she let out a small cry. "What?" I said. "What happened?" "It called my name," she said. "It used your voice. It sounded exactly like you." My entire body went cold. "I'm on the phone with you right now. Whatever's behind you, it's not me." "I know," she said, "but it sounds so much like you. It's saying my name over and over. Bethany, Bethany, Bethany." "Don't listen, just keep walking." I stayed on the phone with her until she finally reached the road. I heard her climb over a guardrail and reach pavement, and she started crying. "I'm at the road," she said. "I made it." "Is it still behind you?" "I don't know, I still haven't looked. I'm too scared." "Look now," I said. "You're at the road, you're safe." I heard her turn around, a long silence. Then, it's standing at the tree line, about 50 feet back. It's just standing there, watching. "What does it look like?" "Like a person, but wrong, too tall. The proportions aren't right. Its arms are too long and it's swaying slightly like it's underwater. And its face," her voice cracked. "It doesn't have one, just smooth skin, but I can feel it looking at me." A car must have come by eventually, because the next thing I heard was Bait talking to someone, explaining she was a thru hiker who needed a ride to the nearest town. The connection cut out after that, and I didn't hear from her again until the next morning. She called me from a motel room in Virginia, and she sounded exhausted, but more like herself. "I'm getting off the trail," she said. "I'm done." "I don't blame you. You believe me, right, about what was following me?" "I saw the photo, Bait. I believe you." She came home a few days later, her thru hike abandoned halfway through. She wouldn't talk about it much, just said she'd hiked alone for too long, and it had gotten to her mentally. But I noticed she'd deleted all her social media accounts and thrown away her hiking gear. She wouldn't even go camping in established campgrounds anymore, places with rangers and bathrooms and other people around. About 3 months after she got back, I was going through my phone and decided to look at that photo again, the one with the figure in the background. I don't know why, morbid curiosity maybe, but when I opened it, the figure had moved. I know that sounds impossible. Photos don't change. But I'd stared at that image for hours when Bait was still on the trail, and I knew exactly where the figure had been standing, far back on the trail, partially obscured by trees. In the photo on my phone, it was closer, maybe 20 feet from where Bait had been standing when she took the picture. Close enough that I could see details now. The way its arms hung almost to its knees, the blank smoothness of its face, the way it was slightly blurred, like it had been moving when the photo was taken. I wanted to ask Bait about it, but I also didn't want to upset her. She was finally starting to seem normal again, laughing at things, making plans. So I kept it to myself and eventually deleted the photo. But sometimes I wonder if deleting it was enough. If whatever was following my sister through those mountains might have noticed her brother looking at photos, paying attention. If maybe it knows about me now too. I don't hike anymore either. And sometimes, late at night when I'm walking to my car after work, I get the feeling that someone's behind me, matching my pace exactly. I never turn around to check. I figure some things are better left unseen, and some questions are better left unanswered. As long as I keep moving, as long as I don't stop, maybe it'll leave me alone. Maybe it's still back in those mountains, waiting for the next solo hiker who spends too much time alone on the trail. Or maybe it's patient. Maybe it can wait years for the right moment. I try not to think about it too much, but on nights when I can't sleep, I listen to the sounds of my apartment and wonder if that creak in the hallway is just the building settling, or if something is out there, learning the sound of my footsteps so it can match them perfectly. Story 5. The thing about Max Patch Mountain in North Carolina is that it's one of the few places on the AT that's completely bald, no trees, just open grass on top with 360-degree views. It's beautiful during the day, popular with hikers and people who drive up just to watch the sunset. But at night, it's exposed in a way that can feel uncomfortable if you're not used to it. No shelter from wind, no cover. Just you and the sky and the mountains rolling away in every direction. I camped up there in August with 2 friends from college, Nina and Garrett. We hiked up in the late afternoon with the plan to catch the sunset and then stargaze. It was a weekend, so there were maybe a dozen other people scattered around the summit when we arrived. Couples with wine, a family with young kids, some solo hikers, everyone friendly and relaxed. We set up our tents in a spot away from the main cluster of people, near the eastern edge, where the grass started to slope down toward the tree line. The sunset was exactly as advertised, spectacular. Layers of purple and orange and pink. Nina took about 100 photos. We ate our dehydrated camping food and watched the other groups start to settle in for the night. The family packed up and hiked back down to the parking area with their kids. The couples zipped themselves into their tents. By 9 o'clock, it was just the distant glow of headlamps and flashlights and the enormous spread of stars overhead. No moon that night, so the Milky Way was vivid enough to cast shadows. I was the first one to see the lights in the valley. They were small, maybe a mile away, down in the trees below the bald. Just small white lights moving in a line, like a group of people hiking with headlamps. Someone's hiking at night, I said, pointing. Nina and Garrett looked where I was indicating. That's weird, Nina said. That trail down there doesn't really go anywhere. It's an old Forest Service road that dead ends after a few miles. Maybe they're lost, Garrett suggested. We watched the lights for a few minutes. They were definitely moving in a line, maybe 8 or 10 of them proceeding steadily through the trees, but something about the movement was strange. They didn't bob or sway the way headlamps do when people walk. They stayed perfectly level, gliding between the trees. That's really weird, Nina said again. The lights continued moving until they reached a point directly below us, then stopped. All of them at once, like someone had given a signal. They stayed motionless for maybe 30 seconds, and then they started moving again. But now they were coming up the mountain, heading toward the bald, toward us. Should we be worried? I asked. It's probably just other hikers, Garrett said, but he didn't sound convinced. Maybe a group camping down there. We watched the lights climb the slope. They were moving faster than people should have been able to move uphill in the dark. Too fast. And they still weren't bobbing or swaying, just that same steady glide. When they reached the tree line at the edge of the bald, they stopped again. We couldn't see who or what was carrying them, just the lights themselves, arranged in a line maybe 40 feet below us where the grass met the forest. Hello, Garrett called out. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet night. No response. The lights didn't move. Maybe we should go to bed, Nina said quietly. It's only 9:30, I said. I don't care, I want to be in my tent. We started packing up our dinner stuff, but we all kept glancing toward the tree line. The lights were still there, still motionless. Nina crawled into her tent and zipped it closed. Garrett and I looked at each other. This is stupid, he said. They're just lights, probably some kind of research equipment or something. Research equipment doesn't move, I said. Well, I'm not going to let some weird lights ruin my night. I'm going to sleep. He got into his tent too, leaving me sitting outside alone. I stared at the lights for a few more minutes, trying to think of a rational explanation. Drones, maybe, but I hadn't heard any buzzing. Flashlights attached to poles, but why? And why arrange them in a line like that? I finally gave up and climbed into my own tent, but I left the rain fly partially unzipped so I could still see outside. I tried to sleep but couldn't. I just lay there in my sleeping bag, listening to the wind move through the grass and watching the opening of my tent. Around midnight, I heard Nina call out softly, "Are you guys awake?" "Yeah," I said. "The lights moved. They're closer." I unzipped my tent enough to look out. She was right. The lights were now halfway up the bald, maybe 20 feet away, still arranged in that perfect line, still not moving. I could see other tents nearby, other campers, but none of them seemed to be reacting. Were we the only ones seeing this? Should we wake the other people? Nina whispered. And tell them what? Garrett said from his tent. That some lights are scaring us. We stayed quiet for a while. Then Nina said, I can hear something, footsteps in the grass, lots of them. I listened, she was right. Multiple footsteps, soft but distinct, moving slowly through the grass toward our tents, but I still couldn't see anything except the lights. No people, no figures, nothing casting shadows in the starlight, just those white lights hanging in the air. The footsteps got closer. I could hear them circling around us, moving between our 3 tents. And then the lights began to rise, lifting up from ground level to about 6 feet high. Now I could see what was beneath them, and I wish I couldn't. The lights were attached to long, thin poles, and the poles were being carried by figures that were just slightly darker than the night around them. Humanoid shapes, but wrong. The proportions weren't right, too tall, too thin, moving with a strange gliding motion like they were floating an inch above the grass. I couldn't make out faces or details, just silhouettes against the stars, but there were at least 10 of them. They'd formed a circle around our tents. Don't move, I whispered. Nobody move. One of the figures approached Garrett's tent. It leaned down, bringing its light close to the fabric, and I heard Garrett make a sound like a strangled gasp. The figure straightened up and moved to Nina's tent next. She whimpered. Then it came to mine. The light was so close I could feel warmth radiating from it, and I saw the figure clearly for just a moment. It looked like a person stretched on a rack, pulled too long, with arms that had too many joints. Where its face should have been, there was just a smooth, dark surface, like obsidian, and then it moved away, taking the light with it. The figures reformed their line and began to move away, gliding back down the slope toward the tree line. We all stayed frozen until the lights disappeared into the trees and the footsteps faded. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Garrett unzipped his tent and crawled out. In the starlight, I could see his face was pale and slick with sweat. What the fuck was that? I don't know, I said. Nina crawled out of her tent too. She was shaking. Did anyone else see us? Did any of the other campers react? I looked around the board at the other tents scattered across the summit. None of them had lights on. Nobody had emerged. It was like we'd been the only ones to experience it. Maybe they were asleep, I said, but I didn't believe it. We stayed up the rest of the night, sitting together outside our tents, watching the tree line. The lights never came back, but I don't think any of us could have slept anyway. When dawn finally started to lighten the eastern sky, the other campers began to stir. A couple emerged from a tent about 50 yards away, stretching and talking about breakfast. They looked completely normal, relaxed, like nothing strange had happened. We packed up quickly and hiked down as soon as there was enough light to see the trail. At the parking area, we passed an older couple who were just starting up. Beautiful morning for it, the man said cheerfully. We nodded and kept walking. On the drive home, Nina pulled up trail forums on her phone, searching for mentions of Max Patch and lights. She found one post from 2019. Has anyone else seen the lights on Max Patch? Camped there last month and saw a line of lights moving up from the valley. They came right up to my tent. I packed up and left at 2 a.m., never going back. The post had 3 replies. 2 people saying it was probably just other hikers with headlamps. One person who said, I saw them in 2015. They're not hikers. Don't try to interact with them. If they circle your tent, don't make a sound. Wait for them to leave. We didn't report it to anyone. What would we have said? We saw some lights and got scared. We couldn't even prove it happened. But I haven't been back to Max Patch since then, even though it's one of the most beautiful spots on the AT. And sometimes I wonder about those other campers we saw that morning, the ones who acted like nothing had happened. Maybe nothing did happen to them. Maybe the lights are selective about who they visit. Or maybe they saw them too, and are just better at pretending everything is normal. Maybe that's the only way to deal with something like that. Pretend it didn't happen, don't talk about it, don't think about it too hard. Because if you start trying to understand what those figures were or what they wanted, you might realize that some questions don't have answers you want to hear. Story 6. I worked for the Forest Service the summer I was 24, doing trail maintenance on sections of the AT through Maryland and southern Pennsylvania. It was good work, physical, outdoors, away from screens and offices. Most days I'd hike to a section that needed clearing, spend hours cutting back overgrowth and repairing water bars, then hike back to the truck. simple and satisfying. I worked with a crew of 4 other people, but sometimes they'd send me out solo to handle smaller jobs that didn't need a full team. That's how I ended up alone on a Tuesday in July, assigned to clear fallen trees on a less-traveled section near Pine Grove Furnace. The area used to be an iron furnace back in the 1800s, and there were still ruins scattered through the woods. Old stone walls, collapsed buildings, rusted machinery slowly being swallowed by vegetation. It gave the whole area a weird vibe, like you were walking through a place that didn't want to be remembered. I parked at the access road around 7 a.m. and hiked in with my chainsaw, tools, and lunch. The first fallen tree was about a mile in, just a widowmaker that had come down across the trail during a recent storm. I made quick work of it, cutting it into sections and rolling them off the path. The second tree was another half-mile further, bigger and more complicated. I was going to be there a while. I'd been working for maybe an hour, taking a water break, when I noticed something odd about the ruins near the trail. There was an old stone foundation maybe 30 yards into the woods, mostly collapsed, but one section of wall was still standing about 8 feet high. Someone had arranged rocks on top of that wall. Not randomly, they were deliberately stacked, balanced on their edges in a way that shouldn't have been stable. 7 stacks, each about a foot tall, evenly spaced along the top of the wall. I walked over to get a closer look. The rocks were local stone, nothing unusual, but the precision of the stacking was unsettling. Each pile was perfectly balanced, and they'd clearly been placed recently. There was no lichen growth, no weather staining. I reached up to touch one and it toppled immediately, scattering across the ground. The noise seemed too loud, and I felt a weird prickle of guilt, like I'd broken something I shouldn't have touched. I went back to work on the tree, but I couldn't stop glancing at that wall. The remaining 6 stacks looked wrong now, unbalanced. Around noon, I took my lunch break and sat with my back against a tree, eating my sandwich and watching the ruins. That's when I saw movement in the foundation, just a flash of pale color disappearing behind the standing wall. I stood up immediately. "Hello," I called. "Anyone there? This is Forest Service. You're not supposed to be camping here." No answer. I walked closer to the ruins, moving carefully because the ground was uneven and full of old bricks. When I reached the wall and looked behind it, there was nothing, just more collapsed stone and overgrowth. But I could see footprints in the soft dirt, bare feet, small, maybe a woman's size or a teenager's. They led from behind the wall deeper into the foundation, then just stopped. No prints leading away, no prints coming in. Just 4 clear impressions in the dirt, and then nothing. I backed away from the ruins and went back to my work site. I told myself it was just someone messing around, playing games with a Forest Service worker. But my hands were shaking when I picked up the chainsaw. I finished cutting the tree as quickly as I could, not being as careful as I should have been. My supervisor would have chewed me out if he'd seen the rough edges I left on some of those cuts. I was packing up my tools around 3 p.m. when I heard singing. A woman's voice, young, coming from the direction of the ruins. The song was old-fashioned, something I half recognized from childhood, maybe a hymn or a folk song. The voice was pretty but emotionless, mechanical, like someone singing without thinking about the words. "Hello," I called again. "Can you come out, please? I need to lock the area up." The singing stopped mid-word, then started again from a different location, closer to the trail. I turned and saw a figure standing near the tree I'd just cut. It was a young woman, maybe late teens, wearing a pale dress that looked handmade. Homespun cloth, like something from a historical reenactment. Her hair was long and dark, hanging loose over her shoulders. She was barefoot, and she was staring directly at me with no expression on her face. "You can't be here," I said, trying to sound official. "This area is closed for maintenance." She didn't respond, just kept staring. And then she smiled, and I felt my stomach drop because the smile was wrong. Too wide, showing too many teeth, held for too long without any warmth or humor behind it. "You need to leave," I said, picking up my gear. "Now." She started walking toward me, still smiling, moving with this strange gliding gait. Her feet weren't quite touching the ground right, like she was walking on a surface slightly higher than the trail. I backed away, keeping my eyes on her, and she stopped. The smile faded. She tilted her head to one side, far enough that it looked painful, and then she spoke. "Why did you knock down my stones?" Her voice was flat, without inflection, like a recording played back at the wrong speed. "I'm sorry," I said, even though I didn't know why I was apologizing. I didn't know they were yours. You need to put them back. I don't remember exactly how they were arranged. Put them back. I looked at the scattered rocks on the ground near the ruins, then back at the woman. She hadn't moved, but she seemed closer somehow, like the distance between us had compressed without her taking steps. Okay, I said, I'll put them back. I walked slowly to the wall, keeping her in my peripheral vision. She didn't follow, just stood there watching with that tilted head. I picked up rocks and tried to balance them on the wall, but my hands were shaking too badly. They kept falling. I tried for maybe 5 minutes, getting more frustrated and frightened until I finally got one stack to hold. Then another. It was getting easier, like the rocks wanted to balance now. I built 7 stacks, and when I finished the last one, I turned around. The woman was gone, just empty trail and afternoon shadows. I grabbed my gear and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, and even then I kept checking the rearview mirror while I drove back to the ranger station. I told my supervisor I'd gotten the trees cleared, but the area gave me a bad feeling and maybe we should put it on the rotation for team maintenance only. He laughed and said I'd been in the woods alone too long, but he agreed. As far as I know, nobody has been sent back there solo since, but here's the thing that still bothers me. About a week later, I was doing research on the Pine Grove furnace area, trying to understand what I'd seen. I found an article about the iron furnace from the 1850s, and it mentioned a tragedy in 1867. A young woman named Judith Kellner, daughter of one of the furnace workers, had disappeared from the settlement. They found her body 3 weeks later in the ruins of an old building. The article said she'd been known for collecting stones and making unusual arrangements with them around the furnace property. The funeral report mentioned she was buried in a handmade dress, pale homespun cloth, and that she'd been barefoot when they found her. The article included an illustration, one of those old woodcut drawings from newspapers. The resemblance to the woman I saw was close enough to make me close my laptop and not look at it again. I tell myself it was just someone who knew the story, dressing up to scare Forest Service workers. But I can't explain the footprints that started and stopped in the middle of the ruins. Can't explain how she moved, or how her voice sounded, or why balancing those stones suddenly got easier like someone was helping me. I finished out that summer, but I requested transfers to sections away from Pine Grove. I still work for the Forest Service, different state now, and I love the job, but I don't do solo maintenance anymore. And if I ever see rocks stacked on ruins or walls, I leave them exactly as they are. Some things are better left untouched, and some people, or whatever they are better left undisturbed. Story 7. My girlfriend Harper convinced me to do a section hike of the AT in Vermont for our anniversary. We'd been together 3 years, and she wanted to do something adventurous instead of the usual dinner and a movie. I wasn't exactly an experienced hiker. I'd done some day hikes and one overnight camping trip, but Harper had done parts of the AT before and promised she'd keep us on easy terrain. We started at a trailhead near Stratton Mountain in October, aiming to hike about 25 miles over 3 days. The fall colors were at their peak, and the weather forecast looked perfect. For the first day and a half, it was exactly what Harper had promised. Beautiful, peaceful, not too challenging. We camped at a designated site the first night, shared it with a couple from Vermont who told us about the best breakfast place in Manchester if we wanted to stop there when we finished. Normal hiking experience, exactly what I'd hoped for. The second day we got a later start than planned because I'd slept badly, kept hearing animals moving around our tent, though Harper said she hadn't heard anything unusual. We hiked until early evening and realized we weren't going to make it to the next shelter before dark. There's a stream about a mile ahead, Harper said, checking her map. We can set up camp there. It's allowed in this section as long as we're a certain distance from the trail. We found the stream right where the map indicated, and Harper led us about 100 yards away from the trail to a flat spot that looked perfect for camping. The stream noise would be nice to fall asleep to, and there was a large boulder that would provide some wind protection. We set up our tent, hung our food bag, and made dinner as the light faded. That's when Harper noticed the initials carved into the boulder. "Look at this," she said, running her fingers over the cuts in the rock. ILB plus SKM 1994. Below that were more sets of initials, different carvings from different years, 1987, 1992, 1998, 2004, all the way up to 2018. That's a lot of couples camping in this exact spot, I said. Or the same couple coming back, Harper suggested, like an anniversary tradition. It seemed sweet at first, romantic, but as I looked at all the different sets of initials, there were at least 20 different carvings. Something felt off. Why are they all couple initials? I asked. No solo names, no group names, just pairs connected with plus signs. Harper shrugged. Popular camping spot for couples, I guess. We finished dinner and settled into our tent as full darkness came on. I was tired enough that I fell asleep quickly despite my nervousness about camping in an undesignated spot. But I woke up sometime around midnight to the sound of Harper's voice. She was talking to someone, her voice low and conversational. I sat up, confused. Harper. She was sitting up in her sleeping bag, facing the tent wall, speaking to it like someone was on the other side. I know, she was saying. I know, we should have been here sooner. Harper, who are you talking to? She turned to look at me, and her expression was blank, like she didn't recognize me. I'm talking to her, she said, pointing at the tent wall. Can't you hear her? There's nobody there. She says we've been away too long. She says we need to add our initials to the rock. My skin went cold. Harper, you're scaring me. Wake up. I think you're having a nightmare. She blinked a few times, and awareness came back into her eyes. What? I'm awake. I am awake. You were talking to the tent wall. She looked at the tent wall, then back at me. I heard someone talking, a woman's voice. She was saying, I don't remember exactly, something about the rock, about adding names. You said we've been away too long. I said that. She looked genuinely confused. I don't remember saying that. I remember hearing the voice and leaning closer to listen, and then you were talking to me. We sat there in the darkness, listening. I didn't hear any voice, but I also didn't feel alone. The tent felt too small suddenly, like something was pressing in on it from outside. I want to leave, I said. It's the middle of the night. We can't hike in the dark. Then we wait until dawn and leave immediately. No breakfast, no packing slowly. We just go. Harper nodded, and I could tell she was feeling it too, that wrongness, that sense of being watched by something that meant us harm. We stayed awake the rest of the night, sitting close together, not talking. Every small sound from outside the tent made us jump. At one point I heard footsteps, definitely human, walking around our campsite. But when dawn came, and we finally got the courage to unzip the tent and look out, there were no prints in the soft ground around us. Just our own, from the night before. We packed up in record time, barely speaking. Harper kept glancing at the boulder with all the carved initials. I want to see something, she said, and before I could stop her, she walked over to it. Oh my God. What? There are new initials, look. At the bottom of the list of carvings, freshly cut into the stone, were two sets of initials, HR plus DK, Harper Rowan and Daniel Kramer. My name and her name connected with a plus sign. The carving looked old, weathered, like it had been there for years, but it definitely hadn't been there the night before. I'd looked at the rock while we were setting up camp, and those initials weren't on it. We left everything we couldn't carry, our camp stove, some of our food, and extra tarp. We just grabbed our essential gear and hiked back to the trail as fast as we could move. We didn't stop until we reached the next shelter, where there were two other hikers having breakfast. Normal, real people who looked at us like we were crazy when we stumbled in, wild-eyed and out of breath. Harper tried to report it when we got back to town. She called the ranger station and told them someone had vandalized a boulder, and there was a weird campsite that seemed to be attracting trouble. They took her information politely, but didn't seem particularly concerned. Kids carve initials in rocks all the time, the ranger said, and private campsites aren't monitored like the shelters. If you had a bad experience, stick to designated camping areas. We broke up 3 months later. Neither of us explicitly said it was because of that night, but I think we both knew. Harper started having nightmares about the voice, about walking back to that boulder and finding more initials, future dates, like the rock was somehow cataloging couples who hadn't camped there yet, or couples who camped there and never left. I kept thinking about all those carved initials spanning decades. 20 different couples, minimum, all drawn to that exact spot. all feeling compelled to carve their names. Where were they now? Were they all okay? I tried to find the location again on trail maps, thinking I'd hike back in daylight with other people and see if the initials were real or if we'd somehow both hallucinated them. But I couldn't find the spot. I know roughly where we left the trail, which stream we camped near, but when I looked at topographic maps and satellite imagery, there was no boulder in that area, no flat camping spot. The terrain didn't match my memory at all, like we'd somehow hiked into a place that doesn't technically exist. Harper moved to Colorado last year. We don't keep in touch, but I saw on social media that she's dating someone new. They look happy in the photos, hiking, camping, doing all the outdoor stuff she loves. I hope they stay away from Vermont. I hope they never decide to camp near a stream and find a boulder covered in couples' initials. Because I think whatever is there collects people, marks them somehow, and maybe we got away, or maybe we're just on a long enough timeline that we haven't been called back yet. Sometimes late at night, I think about driving to Vermont, hiking back to that section of trail, and seeing if I can find the boulder. Seeing if our initials are still there, or if new ones have been added below them. But I never do, because some questions are better left unanswered, and some places are better left forgotten. Story 8. The shelter at Calf Mountain in Shenandoah National Park sits right on the ridgeline, with a view that people drive hours to see. I've been planning to spend a night there during a 5-day section hike, but when I arrived around 4 p.m. on a Thursday in November, there was already someone there. An older man, maybe in his 60s, sitting on the shelter floor with his back against the wall and a 1,000-yard stare that made me uncomfortable immediately. "Hey," I said, dropping my pack. "Okay, if I share the shelter tonight?" He didn't respond for a long moment, then slowly turned to look at me. "You shouldn't stay here," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been shouting. "Keep hiking, get to the next shelter." "That's another 8 miles. I'm pretty tired." "I'm serious, don't stay here." I hesitated. He didn't look dangerous, just haunted, like he'd seen something that had fundamentally changed him. "What's wrong with this shelter?" I asked. "It comes at night." "Every night. I've been here 3 nights now and I can't leave. Every time I try to hike out it gets dark before I make it to the next shelter and I have to come back. It's waiting for me out there." I put my pack down slowly. "What's waiting for you?" "I don't know, I never get a good look, but it follows me. And when I come back here, it stays just outside the shelter, right at the edge. It doesn't come in, but it watches all night." This was clearly someone having a mental health crisis, and I needed to be careful. "Have you called for help? Do you have a phone?" "Dead 3 days ago." "Okay, let me call someone. We can get a ranger up here to help you." I pulled out my phone, but there was no signal. Not unusual in Shenandoah, service was spotty at best. "I'll hike back down to the road and call from there," I said. "Will you be okay for a few hours?" "Don't leave after dark," he said. "Promise me, don't leave after dark." I looked at the sky. The sun was already getting low. I'd be lucky to make it halfway down before I lost light, and hiking steep mountain trails in darkness was asking for an injury. "I'll stay tonight and hike out first thing in the morning," I said. "We'll both go together and get you some help." He nodded, seeming to relax slightly. Okay, but don't leave the shelter after dark, no matter what you hear, no matter what it says." I set up my sleeping bag on the opposite side of the shelter, trying to maintain a respectful distance. The man, he finally told me his name was William Greaves, had very little gear. A sleeping bag that had seen better days, a mostly empty pack, some water bottles. He'd either ditched most of his supplies or hadn't brought much to begin with. We didn't talk much as darkness fell. He just sat there, staring out at the woods, occasionally muttering to himself. Around 8 p.m., I ate some trail mix and offered him some, but he shook his head. "It'll be here soon," he said. "You'll see. Just remember, stay in the shelter. Don't leave the shelter." "Okay," I said, mostly just to calm him down. An hour later I heard it. Footsteps on the trail coming up from the valley, steady, rhythmic, getting closer. William tensed immediately. "Here it comes," he whispered. The footsteps reached the shelter clearing and stopped. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, no headlamp, no figure, just the sound of breathing somewhere out there. And then a voice, "William, come out here, William, I've been looking for you." It was a woman's voice. Young, concerned, caring. William's whole body was shaking. "That's my daughter's voice," he said. "My daughter died 4 years ago." The voice continued. "Dad, why are you hiding? I came all this way to find you. Please come out." "It's not her," William said, louder now, like he was trying to convince himself. "It's not her, she's dead. She's been dead for 4 years." "Dad, that's a horrible thing to say. I'm right here, I'm alive. Come see me, come out and see me." I felt frozen, unable to process what was happening. The voice sounded so genuine, so full of emotion. If I'd been William, I might have believed it, might have walked out of that shelter. "You're not real," William shouted. "Leave me alone." The voice changed, became colder, harder. "Fine, stay in there, but you'll have to come out eventually. You'll get hungry enough, thirsty enough, and I'll be waiting." The presence, whatever it was, moved around the shelter. I could hear it walking on dead leaves, circling the structure. At one point it came close enough that I could hear its breathing clearly. Too loud, too deliberate, not quite human. And then it spoke again, but this time it was using my voice. My own voice, coming from something outside the shelter. "William, this is getting ridiculous. Come help me gather firewood. It's cold." I felt my throat close up. William looked at me with wide eyes. "It does that," he said. "It copies people." I heard my voice the first night, calling myself out of the shelter, like there were 2 of me. The thing using my voice continued. "William, I'm serious. Stop being paranoid and help me with the firewood. We need to keep warm." "I'm right here," I said, my real voice shaking. "I'm not outside, that's not me." "I know," William said. The circling continued for hours. The thing would walk around the shelter, then stop at different positions and speak. Sometimes it used William's daughter's voice, begging him to come out. Sometimes it used my voice, getting increasingly frustrated and angry. Once it used a child's voice, a little boy calling for his daddy. William cried when he heard that. "My son," he said. "He's alive, lives in Oregon. That's not him, that's not him." Around 3 a.m., the sounds finally stopped. Just cut off mid-sentence. It had been saying something in my voice about needing to leave, needing to get back to the trail, and then complete silence. William and I sat there for another hour, not speaking, just waiting to see if it would come back. When dawn finally started to lighten the sky, William stood up stiffly. "We should go now," he said. "It's weaker in daylight. We can make it out if we leave now." We packed up quickly and started down the trail. Every shadow between the trees made me jump. Every bird call sounded wrong. But we hiked for 3 hours without incident and finally reached the road where my car was parked. William collapsed against the hood, crying with relief. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for not leaving me there alone." I drove him to the ranger station and explained the situation, that he'd been stranded at the shelter for multiple days with no phone, that he needed medical attention and probably some psychological evaluation. They took him in, and I gave my statement. A ranger told me they'd check the shelter, make sure there were no safety issues. I never heard what they found, if anything. I hiked other sections of Shenandoah after that, but I never went back to Calf Mountain, and I've noticed something odd when I look at the shelter logs online, where hikers record their stays. The Calf Mountain shelter gets entries from people who say they stayed there, but a lot of the comments are strange. Heard voices all night but never saw anyone. Something kept circling the shelter until dawn. Don't stay here alone. And every few months, someone writes something like, "Stayed here 3 nights, can't seem to leave. If anyone reads this, I might still be here." Those entries disappear after a while, like someone's moderating them or cleaning up the logs. But I've seen screenshots. Other hikers have noticed the pattern too, discussed it on forums. Most people think it's just trolls or people playing up the spooky isolation for effect. But I think about William, about how genuinely terrified he was. About hearing my own voice coming from something outside the shelter, calling me to come out into the darkness. And I wonder how many people have stayed at that shelter and heard voices of people they loved. How many of them walked out to investigate and never made it back to the trail. How many of them are still there, in some way, having their voices borrowed by whatever lives in those woods. Story 9. I met Sonia Lynn at a hostel in Damascus, Virginia. We were both section hiking the AT, going the same direction, similar pace. After running into each other at 3 different shelters over 4 days, we decided to just hike together for a while. It's common on long trails, trail partnerships that form spontaneously and dissolve just as easily when people's schedules or speeds diverge. Sonia was good company, funny and competent, and I was glad to have someone to share the experience with. We'd been hiking together for about a week when we reached a section of trail in southern Virginia that was reportedly having bear problems. Signs at the last road crossing warned hikers to be vigilant, make noise, and absolutely do not leave food unattended. We took it seriously. Neither of us wanted a bear encounter. That evening, we reached a shelter and found it empty except for a single entry in the trail log from 3 days earlier. Bear activity heavy. Something took my pack from the shelter while I was sleeping, left my boots behind, had to hike out barefoot. Be careful. That's horrifying, Sonia said, reading over my shoulder. A bear got close enough to take someone's pack while they were sleeping. And selective enough to leave the boots, I added. That's weird, right? A bear would have just torn everything apart. We decided to hang our packs from the bear cables, even though we'd be sleeping right there in the shelter. Better safe than sorry. We also kept our boots inside our sleeping bags, awkward and uncomfortable, but better than hiking out barefoot. As the light faded, we made extra noise cooking dinner, clanging pots and talking loudly, hoping to discourage any curious wildlife. The night started normally, cool but not cold, sounds of the forest settling in. I was almost asleep when Sonia shook my shoulder. Do you hear that? I listened. There was something moving outside the shelter. Heavy footsteps, but not the shambling gait of a bear. These were deliberate, measured, human footsteps. Hello, I called out. Anyone there? The footsteps stopped. Then, after a moment, a voice responded. Help me. It took my pack. I need help. It was a man's voice, shaky and scared. Sonia and I looked at each other. Are you the person who wrote in the trail log? She called out. From 3 days ago. Yes, I've been trying to find my way out, but I keep getting turned around. I need help, please. Something about this felt wrong, but I couldn't articulate why. Come into the light, I said. We have flashlights. I can't, I'm hurt. I can't make it up to the shelter. Can you come down here? Where exactly are you? Sonia asked. Just down the trail, maybe 20 feet, please. I've been out here for 3 days with no food. Sonia started to get up, but I grabbed her arm. Wait, something's not right. Someone needs help, she said. If he's been out here for 3 days, how is he still this close to the shelter? Why didn't he hike out during daylight? The voice came again, more insistent. Please, I'm scared. I can hear it moving in the woods. The thing that took my pack, it's out here with me. Sonia pulled her arm free and grabbed her flashlight. I'm going to at least look, if he's injured. I don't know why I said it so forcefully, but something in my gut was screaming that this was a trap. Please, let's wait until morning. If he's really there, he can wait a few more hours. The voice changed, became angry. You're just going to leave me out here? What kind of people are you? We'll help you at first light, I called back. Just stay where you are. Fuck you, fuck both of you. The footsteps started up again, but now they were circling the shelter, walking around and around, maintaining the same distance. And as they walked, I realized what had been bothering me. The footsteps were too even. No stumbling, no hesitation despite the darkness and the rough terrain. And there was no light source, no headlamp or flashlight, just those steady footsteps moving confidently through pitch darkness. Sonia heard it too. She sat back down on her sleeping bag and I could see her hands shaking. That's not a person, she whispered. The footsteps continued circling. After the third lap around the shelter, the voice spoke again, but it had changed. Now it was Sonia's voice. I'm going to look. If he's injured, playing back exactly what she'd said minutes earlier, perfect mimicry. Then my voice, something's not right. My exact words, my exact tone. The thing was replaying our conversation. We sat there in horror as it continued, mixing up the order, combining fragments. Help me, something's not right. I need help. Fuck both of you, please, I'm scared. This went on for hours. The circling, the voice mimicry, occasionally adding new phrases. Come down here, come out of the shelter. Just for a minute, I want to see your faces. All in voices it had borrowed from us, or from the man in the trail log, or from God knows who else. Neither of us slept. We just sat there with our flashlights, pointing them out into the darkness whenever the voice got too close. Around 4 a.m., I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Our packs were swaying slightly on the bare cables. Something was tugging at them, trying to pull them down. I could see a shape up there, silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky, tall and impossibly thin, with arms stretched up to reach the cables. "It's trying to take our packs," I whispered. Sonia saw it too. She picked up a rock and threw it at the figure. It hit something, we heard the impact, and the shape dropped down and moved away. But it didn't go far, just retreated into the trees and waited. When dawn finally came, we could see the area around the shelter clearly. There were marks in the dirt where something had circled repeatedly, but they weren't footprints. More like drag marks, long and continuous, as if something had been pulled around the shelter. And up at the bare cables, there were scratches in the wood of the posts. Long, deep scratches high up, 8 or 9 feet off the ground. We packed up in silence and started hiking. We didn't talk about what had happened, just moved as fast as we could to put distance between us and that shelter. Around noon, we passed a southbound hiker, an older guy who looked like he'd been on the trail for months. "Hey," he said cheerfully, "how's the trail ahead?" "Fine," Sonia said quickly, "all good." "Did you stay at Dismal Creek Shelter last night?" We both froze. "How did you know?" I asked. "Just a guess. You both look like you didn't sleep. People don't sleep well there, not anymore." He adjusted his pack straps. "There used to be more shelters in this section, but they closed some of them down. Too many incidents. Dismal Creek is still open officially, but rangers don't recommend it. Something about the topography makes sound carry weird, and people get spooked." "That's one way to put it," Sonia muttered. The hiker nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I stayed there once about 5 years ago. Heard voices all night, sounded like my ex-wife. She's alive and well in Ohio, by the way, but something out there knew her voice, knew exactly what she sounded like when she was angry. Spent the whole night yelling at me to come out of the shelter." He shook his head. "Anyway, better shelters north of here, good hiking." He continued on, and Sonia and I looked at each other. "The rangers know," she said. "They know something's there and they're just warning people quietly, not closing the shelter. I guess they can't close it without an official reason. And what would they say? Shelter closed due to voice-mimicking entity." We hiked together for another week before our schedules diverged. She had to get back to work, and I was continuing north for another month. We exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch, but we never really did. I think we both wanted to forget about that night, and staying in contact would have meant acknowledging it happened, talking about it, trying to understand it. I finished my section hike and went home, and I thought I was done with the whole experience. But about 6 months later, I got a text from Sonia, just a link to a news article with no message. The article was about a hiker who'd gone missing in Southern Virginia, last seen at Dismal Creek Shelter. They'd found his tent and sleeping bag at the shelter, boots neatly placed outside the tent, but no sign of him. The search had been called off after 10 days. At the bottom of the article, there was a quote from one of the searchers. "We heard someone calling for help on the 3rd day of the search, but every time we got close to the voice, it moved. We tracked it for hours before we realized it was leading us in circles." I didn't respond to Sonia's text. What was there to say? We both knew what had happened to that hiker. We both knew what was out there in those woods, borrowing voices and calling people into the darkness. And we both knew how lucky we were that we'd stayed in the shelter, that we hadn't gone down to help the voice that sounded so human, so scared, so real. Because if we had, someone else would eventually receive a text message about 2 hikers who disappeared from Dismal Creek Shelter, whose boots were found neatly placed outside their tent, who were last heard calling for help somewhere in the woods, but could never quite be found. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit the like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.